We're going to be covering both LSAT prep and finding an attorney mentor. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. And I'm joined by my good friend, Anjie V. How you doing, Anjie?
Hi there. Hi, everybody. So my name's Anjie. I run a company called Leg Up Legal, and we provide a mentoring platform that connects pre-law students to attorneys for mentoring so they can figure out what the practice of law is all about before they dive in and start applying and taking the LSAT and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Great. So I'm really excited for our discussion tonight. We'll do this as a two-parter. First part on LSAT prep, next part on the attorney mentoring. So let's dive in. A lot of recent changes to talk about.
Yeah, well, I've got a ton of questions for you, Steve, because I'll tell you, the game has changed since I went to law school. So, now the LSAT's gone digital, and I'm sure, a lot of people have the same questions I do. But now I also saw that there's way more test dates than there used to be. So can you tell me, when do you recommend that students start taking the LSAT?
Yeah, there are a lot more test dates than there used to be. It's gone from being 4 times a year to as many as 9 or 10 times a year.
That's crazy.
But, yeah, it's really nuts. But that's nice because there's always another test date just around the corner.
Yeah.
As far as when to take the LSAT, it's really whenever you're ready. Scores are good for 5 years. So if you have a lot of free time over the summer, you can study over the summer, take it in the fall.
But now, is it still the way that it used to be where you might not get your score back until the registration deadline for the next test might have passed already? Because I know that snuck up on me once.
Correct. So, yeah, that's entirely possible. Even though the LSAT's gone digital, you still have to wait 3 weeks to get your score back. I know it's crazy. They should be able to tell you instantly, but due to some analyses they do on their end, they want to make sure everything's up to snuff. So they crunch the numbers and then get back to you. But my take is it's worth registering for the next test just in case, to have that, because it gives you peace of mind before going in. Let's say you are registered for February, but maybe you're going to want to take March also. Register for March, and that way you have secured the option to take it in March. So that way, if February doesn't go well, you've got the backup.
Yeah, and do they refund it if you cancel by a certain date or no?
There are partial refunds. LSAC loves their money. They love those fees. So they will give you a partial refund if you postpone before the deadline. And then if you withdraw, then you don't get anything back. But at least law schools will never even know that you were registered for that additional test date.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you recommend that students study for the LSAT now? I mean, since it is digital, should they be taking it on tablets or should they be, doing books? I mean, we were old school. We just used the books.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I used only books, of course. But the thing is that although the LSAT has gone digital, most of the exams published by LSAC are in paper form. So I'd say do a lot of your work out of the books, but do at least a few exams in the digital format. And LSAC has generously put 3 out of about 100 exams in the digital format. So you got a 3% digital conversion rate there.
Oh,
exams
man.
71, 73, and 74 are in the digital format on LSAC's site at familiar.lsac.org. And most of the rest are available in books of 10 on Amazon for about $20 each.
And is there any way that the students can actually get a hold of, one of the Surface Go's to try it out before the test or no?
Yeah, I mean, you can go out and buy a Microsoft Surface Go tablet if you want. I think any old tablet's perfectly fine, though. So if you already have an iPad, if you already have an Amazon Fire tablet, those are perfectly good substitutes. The idea is just to really get a sense of what the feel is like to walk through the digital LSAT with the touch screen and all the interactive features and such.
Okay. So I know a lot of students are probably going to be applying, right now, since it's January still. I think, probably wasn't there just an administration here in early January, I thought?
Yeah, there was.
So, how should people be preparing for the LSAT if they're like in the home crunch, if they're in their final few weeks of studying?
Yeah, so let's say you're taking the LSAT about 1 month from now. There's a test date about a month from now. I would focus on full-length timed exams and detailed review of those exams. And I've got here for you Steve's LSAT practice test rule. That is maximum 2 tests per week, minimum 2 hours reviewing each test. Most students don't review enough. And the real value in doing these exams is in having the opportunity to make mistakes so that you can figure out what you need to work on and you have material to analyze in depth. So review those problems.
Okay. And is there anything special that they should do to prepare for the digital LSAT in particular?
Well, practice on the tablet if you can. Do at least a few exams in that format. And for the rest, treat your books like screens. Don't write on them. Do all your work on scratch paper to the side. And if you happen to have access to the PDFs of the old exams, you could also load those up on your computer screen or tablet to at least mimic the idea of looking at a screen while you work and doing all your note-taking and diagramming to the side.
Okay, that's a great idea. So are there any new changes to the LSAT this year that students should keep in mind?
Well, the biggest change is just simply the fact that it's gone digital. And that's, of course, a format, like a content delivery change, not the nature of the content itself.
Sure.
But a handful of recent changes. In June 2007, they switched to having a dual or comparative reading comprehension passage. Rather than 4 long passages, it's 3 long and 2 short. And that change was over 10 years ago. But I just talked to somebody today, actually, who had been studying the older exams, those numbered in the 40s and 30s, that do not have this change. And so you want to make sure that, of course, you're looking at more recent exams, those especially numbered in the 70s and 80s. Another big change is that starting with the Prep Test 57, which was in 2009, they added a rule substitution or rule equivalency question in logic games. So basically drill those questions, do a bunch of questions, games containing that question specifically. You guys, a drill, just do only that question from each of those games. Just get a sense of what it's like, because it's not necessarily harder, but it is different. And when you only see it occasionally, that's what makes it scary.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the whole LSAT's scary.
Yeah, believe me, everybody feels that way.
It's not just the stuff that's occasional. But so are there, now that the test is offered so often, are there limits on how often you can take it?
Yeah, it's funny because there actually weren't any limits for a while, but LSAC realized that they can't produce 10 totally new tests per year. It cost them over $750,000 to produce a single test form.
Yeah.
So to go from making 4 of those a year or 3 of them a year to making 10 of them a year, they just can't ramp up that quickly. So what they do is they reuse old unreleased exams. Because they are reusing all these old exams time and time again, if they didn't have any limit on the number of times you could take it, you could take it all 10 times each year and then see the same questions again, and of course get boosted up as a result of that. So they want to limit the potential overlap. So what's the
limit now?
So the new limit is 3 times in one testing cycle. Testing cycles run from June to May of the following year. So 3 times in one cycle, 5 times in 5 years, and 7 times for life. And if you get a 180, you can't take it again.
Oh, well, why would you?
Why would you, except for bragging rights?
Yeah, well, or you risk getting a lower score, right?
Maybe. So those are the limits. These don't really affect hardly anybody. I don't love that there are limits because since law schools don't average multiple scores, it only benefits you to retake. If you do worse, no big deal. If you get a boost, even through luck alone, that only helps your chances. And the average person, there's a margin of error or score band of 3.5 points on each end. So if you deserve a 160, you might get a 160, but you might get a 163 or 164. And obviously, a 164 opens far more doors than a 160 would.
Yeah.
So it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you said that they don't average the scores anymore, but I mean, if you have a huge jump in your score, do you still recommend, explaining that on your application, or how do you handle that? If you have, your first score that you took, you think was totally unrepresentative of what your capabilities are. And, maybe your first score was a 145 and your next score is a 168. And how do you handle the lower score?
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of admissions officers about this, and honestly, their answers vary. I feel like a lot of them will say, just go ahead, write an addendum if he makes you feel good, because people feel the need to explain things like that. And I get the impulse, like it is a question, but at the same time, the numbers are the numbers. So let's say if you took it a couple times and didn't get a score that you wanted, their answer would just be retake. Or you could say, my my undergraduate GPA is higher than my SAT scores would have led you to expect. So therefore, I'm not a good test taker, but my GPA is higher than you would think. So trust I will do well in law school despite that. But a lower followed by a higher, I mean, you got the higher number. That's what they really care about. So my inclination is to say, don't bother in a case like that unless you really have a good reason. If you want to say like the day I took it the first time, my grandma was sick or something like that, you know, or I wasn't
feeling well. Or there was some weird anomaly with the test or
Exactly. Or like there was like a digital LSAT tech issue. You could say that if you want to, and they'll be like, yeah, okay, fine. But then ultimately getting the higher number is what really matters.
Okay. All right. So, and what about the new LSAT writing? I know that there's a new format for that too. So tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah, so the LSAT writing is now digital, meaning you're no longer doing it at the test center anymore. You have up to 1 year to complete it from your own device after the test. So let's say you're registered for the February LSAT, you take it. At that moment that you take it, you can then go home after the test if you want to and log on right away and do it, or anytime later. And because it's typed, law school admission officers are more likely to look at it because handwriting issues are no longer a concern. They can actually read what you type and benefit to you, their spell check, and you can probably type faster than you can write, and it's easier to edit. So don't do it the day of because your brain will be fried, but do it maybe a week later or so, but just don't forget to do it because they do want to see it.
Okay. But that's nice that you don't have to do it on the test day anymore.
Exactly. They just shortened test day by 35 minutes.
Yeah. Well, when your brain's already battered that much, you're thankful for the break. So
exactly.
And how do you recommend preparing for the LSAT writing?
Honestly, I don't recommend doing that much just because the scored portions of the LSAT are so much more important. Yeah. But since it is typed, maybe they'll look at it more. So especially if you're a non-native English speaker or if your grades in English in college weren't that great, you want to show them that you can write well. So I would say maybe do a practice writing sample or two and have somebody look at it. Bottom line is you want to make a well-reasoned, reasonable argument, choosing between two options, picking one, arguing in favor of it, acknowledging the weaknesses of your choice and the benefits of the other, but still strongly coming down on the side that you chose. That's pretty much it. Okay. I would just say do a couple if you like, have somebody look them over, give you feedback, but that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all those tips. If I have any LSAT questions, I'm definitely coming to you.
Sure. Let's see. Advice on canceling an LSAT score. Would you explain why in an addendum to a law school? If you have just one cancellation, it's not a big deal. Even 2 or 3 is okay, but really three or more could start to look like you're a little bit flaky, like you're not really taking the LSAT when you're fully ready to take it. So, which could exhibit poor judgment or just not fully thinking it through. So one cancellation, no big deal. But if you have more than a few, I would write an addendum and say, one time the digital LSAT tablet malfunctioned, or one time there was a fire alarm that went off, or one time I was sick, or I got bad advice to take it just so I would see how I did, that sort of thing. High LSAT, how much can a high LSAT score and good recommendations and such compensate for a relatively lower GPA? A lot. The LSAT is the biggest factor in the law school admission process, then your GPA, then pretty much everything else. So a super high LSAT, it could compensate for a relatively lower GPA. And yeah, you could still get into a top 14 law school. It's kind of funny how just one day, performance on one day can counteract everything else, but that's how it works. So put a lot into it. Most people want to study for the LSAT only over 2 to 3 months, but it really takes 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. And to circle back to that question on things aside from LSAT and GPA, do they matter? Yes. Personal statement, diversity statement, resume, rec letters, all of that matters, but not nearly as much as the LSAT. It's numbers driven. That's just how it is. It comes back to the rankings, like I said earlier, the runt syndrome, rankings under numerical threshold. As for best review books, best free resources, the LSAT prep tests are the best source of actual LSAT questions. Most of them are available in books of 10 on Amazon for about $20, $25. On my website, the LSAT blog, I also have guides, cheat sheets, checklists, explanations, and full video courses for every section of the exam. There's also the Khan Academy as a free resource in conjunction with the Law School Admission Council. The material itself is not as great as it could be. It's more like a set of questions and explanations rather than a cohesive system. But they do provide you with 11 free practice tests online, on the website, on mobile. So those are great to use. There's also 3 exams in the digital format on LSAC's site at familiar.lsac.org. I will send out a link to my website and the free resources after this session. Everything I have, the YouTube channel, the podcast, the Facebook group, the Instagram, all of that. As for maximum times I recommend taking the LSAT, I would say probably 3 or 4 is the most I'd recommend. 5 or 6 starts to look a little bit, again, flaky, like you're not totally ready and exercising good judgment when you take it. Is getting 1 high score better than taking it 3 times to get that high score? Of course, even though they don't average multiple scores and they only take the highest, it's still better to get that in 1 shot than 3 shots. But if it takes you 3 shots, it's okay. You gotta work with what you have wherever you're at. And if you took it before and got a lower score, so be it. No big deal. All right, I think that was all the questions that we had to run through here. Folks can find me, Steve Schwartz, through the LSAT blog, as well as the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. And of course, reach out to me personally via email as well. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.